Do you know what the NCCD is? Do you know how to collect the data for that? What does it mean? In this video, I'm going to take you through what the NCCD is, what data you need to collect, how to simplify it, and how you can do this in your school context. Hi, I'm Tracy Ashbridge, and this is my latest in the videos around how we can help learning support teachers complete their role. It's quite a wide and varied role, but one of the things is that we actually have to do this thing called the NCCD, Nationally Consistent Collection of Data, every year in August. And it's a big job. And it's not a job that we just do in August, it's a job that we collect the data all year round. And this data informs the funding. Now, no other department in the school, as far as I'm aware, brings in the sort of funding that NCCD does to support the school to run. So it's really critical that we get this right, but it's also critical that we don't overdo it, because we could really go to town and burn ourselves out and burn the teachers out in terms of collecting data, and that's not what the system was designed to do. The system was designed to be information that is already being documented by teachers regardless. So to be in the NCCD, a student needs to have a disability. Now, the disability would come from whatever's defined in the Disability Discrimination Act of 1992. So this could be a total or partial loss of a person's bodily or mental functions, total loss or partial loss of part of the body, the presence of an organism or disease or illness, presence of a body of organism capable of causing disease or illness, interesting, capable of, or a disorder or malfunction that results in the person learning differently from a person without the disorder. So dyslexia falls into that one, or ADHD. And then a disorder, illness or disease that affects a person's thought processes, perception of reality, emotions, judgments, and results in disturbed behaviour. So quite a range of things fall into that Disability Discrimination Act. And sometimes you have to pull that up just to go, yep, this diagnosis fits into there. Most of the time, diagnosis we get for students in school easily fits into one of those categories. So when we're looking at what we need to do, there are 4 levels of support within the NCCD. QDTP, Quality Differentiated Teaching Programs. So your basic differentiation covers these kids. You don't have to do a huge amount differently, but then they're supported. They just need a few tweaks from time to time. We have supplementary, where we support the students, and these are keywords: some days, sometimes. Substantial students are supported most days, most times. And extensive students are supported all day, all times. So that really helps, and those diagnoses are on the big A3 sheet that you will use to moderate. Then there's 4 categories of disability within the NCCD. There's cognitive, that covers things like dyslexia, ADHD, and then we have social emotional, so we may have depression, anxiety. Autism may fit in this one. That depends on what else is going on for the student. I've worked with students who have a huge literacy difficulty and autism. So dyslexia and autism, dyslexia is cognitive, autism is social emotional usually. So which one is it? And that's where you have to look at the information you have, the evidence from teachers about their planning, the evidence of the conversations that have been had through the year, the support that's been given. Has the support been mainly given for the academic learning, the literacy side of things, or has it been given for the social emotional? And that will change often from year to year as the student gets older. So just be aware that you can only pick one category, and sometimes some students are being supported in both. Recently, I had a student with dyslexia whose social emotional support was significantly more than their literacy support, and actually went through a social emotional. We would do physical, so students with cerebral palsy, things like that would go under physical. Now sensory, that just confuses some people. This is just hearing and vision generally. This is not sensory processing disorder, because that's part of autism. So sensory has to be that you can't hear, you can't see, those sorts of things. There's not often very many of those, but you'll probably have the odd one from time to time. So once we've done that, we now need to think about the different evidence we need to collect for the NCCD. So the first one is, does the student have a diagnosis? Have you got that in paper that you can put it somewhere in your school system where you can access it easily? In the student's file, student's electronic file, needs to be a place that says, this is the diagnosis and here's the evidence of that. You can use parent disclosed diagnosis. I much prefer to have the piece of paper from the paediatrician or the specialist rather than, oh, my child's got ADHD. Well, how do we know for certain? And there's an awful lot of parents go, oh yeah, my child's got ADHD. Well, is it diagnosed? Has they seen the paediatrician? No, I just think so. Well, that's not good enough for this purpose. Then we need to have the adjustments that have been recorded as being provided to the student. Now this goes in the teacher's daily, monthly, termly planner. So as they plan out their lessons, they would write the adjustments they make. So John Smith needed a scribe for this task. Now I provide a list at the top for my teachers of what we call ongoing adjustments, things that we do. Every time it's a writing task, Johnny needs a scribe. So I put that at the top. So we don't rewrite it all the time. Don't copy paste. That's not good use of anybody's time and effort. So we would put anything that we're doing to adjust for that student. So maybe you've got a student with autism that's had a really rough break time. You might put a note at the bottom that said that the adjustment was John Smith had difficulty at break time. It gave him a 10-minute time to self-regulate before I asked him to start the first task or to join the class on the mat. That's an adjustment. You didn't have to do that for everyone else. You've done that especially for John Smith, because right now John Smith needs to regulate before he can come and join your class and actually be in a position to learn. So we need to have that. We also need to have ongoing review and monitoring of those adjustments. So at the bottom of my planners, all my teachers have, well, this is what worked, this is what I'm going to do next term. If that's completed, then that covers that for me. And then any consultation, collaboration you have with parents need to be documented. Now that can just be minutes, that can be signatures on an IEP can help contribute towards that. You could have notes from parent-teacher night. There's lots of opportunities in school where you've made a phone call to a parent. Document it in your notes somewhere, wherever you document them in your school. Mine go in a section called notes, and I can just pull them up when I need them as evidence to look for what level. So teachers will potentially push back and say, do I need to write all this? Yes, we need 10 weeks worth of evidence over the year. Now those 10 weeks don't need to be consecutive. We need effectively the worst 10 weeks that this student needed support. And for some students in the early years of school, that can be all sorts of different times for all sorts of different reasons as they learn to regulate. But actually, writing and recording the adjustments is actually part of your responsibility as a professional, as a teacher. It comes from your AITSL requirements, it comes from the requirements from the Disability Discrimination Act, but it's also a requirement for NCCD, which is actually a tiny part of this. This is really NCCD collecting data that should already be there. This isn't created for NCCD. So how much evidence do you need? As I said, 10 weeks through the school year, doesn't have to be consecutive. I ask my teachers to record for Disability Discrimination Act all the time. If a parent came to me and said, my child's dyslexic, what support have they had? I need to be able to pull out the support and go, well, all these things are in place. All these things have been documented. When you are documenting, you can put in this, what I call front loading. So as you're planning, you know that you've got John Smith in your class, you know he's not going to be able to do this task. He's going to need some adjustments to be able to access the task, so you can actually put those in as you plan. And then you might find if you're planning with a few different teachers, if you put that in for John Smith, they also use that same adjustment for a few other students as well. So it helps to put it in up front. When you're planning, you're thinking, oh, okay, how would I adjust this? What other things am I going to do to make this easier, harder, to help the student engage? Imputed students. Now this is a really challenging one. So schools can impute a student into the NCCD. Teachers and the support at school, the executive team, can say, I believe that John Smith has a diagnosis. We just don't know what it is yet. We haven't had it formally diagnosed, but there is enough evidence to show that we have a disability under the Disability Discrimination Act. And if you've got enough data, enough evidence, absolutely go ahead and add that student in. But be aware that once you have added them, imputed them into the system, you have to make sure you've informed the parents. But secondly, once they're in, they are protected by the disability discrimination for the rest of their schooling. So don't make this decision lightly. Potentially hold off a few years until you're absolutely certain that this student has an imputed disability. So who decides the student levels? Well, there needs to be a team of people who work together to moderate what happens. So in my school, we all go back and we all have a checklist and we look for evidence at the end of the year, just before that August deadline. and we go through and we say, I think this student is supplementary in the social imaginer category. And we would then, once everybody has moderated some students, we then sit together and go, I agree. And if we disagree, everybody pulls up the information. But remember, there has to be a diagnosis first. We have had a student where the psych report said there is no diagnosis. Doesn't technically mean, there's lots of support happening, but doesn't fall under NCCD because they don't tick that box. So take a look at my blog post where I've documented I put some links to some really good articles on the NCCD website. And if you like and subscribe again, then you can follow and find the next video when it is published.